You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Not only does half of the U.S. shop at our stores every day, our industry, more than half of it is made up of one-store operators. And all of them are probably looking to seek how to grow. When they go from one store to two stores, all of a sudden, they're called a multi-unit operator. But are they a multi-unit leader? We're going to talk about leadership and what you need to know when you have more than one unit, whether it's 2 or 2,000. Welcome to Convenience Matters. My name is Jeff Lenard with NACS.
And I'm Carolyn Schnare, also with NACS. And today we're joined by Jim Sullivan. He's the CEO of Sullivan. And Jim is going to talk to us a little bit about leadership. And as Jeff mentioned, here we are. We're in the summer of 2020 and things are constantly evolving. But one thing that is certain is leadership. So you have to know whatever's thrown at you, whatever changes day to day in the real world, that your people are there for you and you're there for your people. So I want to talk a little bit with Jim and Jeff about that. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much. Excited about being here.
So Jim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, your background?
Yeah, I began in the food service industry, in the restaurant industry specifically. I worked my way up from a bartender to a manager, to a multi-unit manager, worked for several different brands, including Starbucks, Brinker International, Chipotle, and then wrote a book about 10 years ago called Multi-Unit Leadership. That proved to be pretty popular. And as a result, other businesses, both in retail and food service, contacted me about the research we had done and about the insight we had gained from this research to help develop their multi-unit franchisees and their single-unit operators into multi-unit operators. Obviously, every brand has a vested interest in making a single operator more successful and open several more units. And it's a challenge to go from one store to many stores, which I'm sure we'll talk about today.
And when you in your book, in your presentations, the word leader is prominent. What does it mean when you talk about leader or leadership when you're talking about multi-units? What's the difference between, just being a multi-unit operator and being a multi-unit leader?
Well, it's more than just a matter of semantics. Certainly, everybody would prefer to be a leader rather than an operator. Managers get things done, and leaders inspire other people to get the same things done, perhaps even better. So when we think about management or operations, it's one thing to get it done. It's another thing to have indirect influence to help others get it done in a bigger way. So to me, a leader differs from an operations person or a manager in that they inspire and motivate many more people toward a common goal.
And thinking about our businesses, a lot of them are family businesses, even those that have several dozen stores. It might be a second generation, third generation, fourth generation. So there's often a lot of shorthand with family members. But how do you kind of separate how you might work as a family business and know the dynamics, and there it might play out a little bit more because I said so, because that's the family dynamic. But how do you kind of take a step back and look at leadership in family businesses? So you're constructing it a little different. You're taking that step back. It's going to be a real challenge for a lot of businesses.
Well, it is. If you own a brand and you employ area directors or multi-unit operators to oversee a region or a district or an area, you can pretty much mandate what they can do and what they can't do. You can hold them a bit more accountable for results. If you have family members, as you suggest, in your business, involved in your business, and helping you operate your business, it gets a little trickier, certainly. I think that you can't just really you could tell them what to do. You could be very clear in your expectations. I think always, if we filter it through what we're doing and what our expectations are, how it's related to the customer experience, how it benefits the customer. That's probably one of the smartest ways to frame leadership, training, development, and expectations. I think even with family members, setting expectations, a core tenet of great leadership, is probably your first step. Granted, as you're implying, there might be a little bit more pushback from a person that you see at home at the end of your shift versus a person that you employ. But setting those expectations, always filtering what you're asking for through how it improves the customer experience, is something that really no one can argue with, and you'll get less pushback on, and then you're all consistently working toward the same goal.
So, Jim, your book, Multiunit Leadership, we'll talk more about that later, where you can get it, where they can find it, everybody on listening. But I know you talk a lot about, you talk about as a team, the team approach, and you just mentioned there, whether you're seeing the same person at home later or not. But in terms of how do you go from one of the analogies I think you use somewhere either in your website is quarterback to coach. How do you balance that? How do you go from being the taskmaster to now having to look at many stores? Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 10, and still motivate folks to do their best?
That's a great question. And it's ironic. If you are exceptional at being a store manager, if you work for a brand, they will promote you to be a multi-unit manager. And what the ironic part is that everything that made you good as a store manager, or 90% of the skills that made you good as a store manager and earned you that promotion, cannot be used as a multi-unit leader. Let me explain. If you have one store, it's pretty much hands-on. If you have a problem, you can do it yourself. If there's an inventory situation, you can resolve it yourself. If it's a hiring situation, you can take it upon yourself to find better people or develop better people. If there's a customer service issue, you handle it. But if you oversee 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 stores, if you don't delegate, you'll die. You have a finite amount of time, and you go now from hands-on to indirect influence. So that's a skill that you didn't learn necessarily as a single store manager, and yet as a multi-unit leader, it's something you have to do on a daily basis. So a single store manager is a doer, and a multi-unit leader is a delegator. A single store manager might be a tactician, but a multi-unit leader has to be a strategist. A single store manager manages details, but a multi-unit leader provides direction. So I guess you could sum it up that a single store manager controls, a multi-unit leader governs. So learning those skills, you're sort of promoted on the battlefield, and you have to learn it on the fly. I think that the resources at our website and our book really help you with that. But the point is, you really have to learn how to go from one unit hands-on to that indirect influence. That's a complex skill that isn't normally part of our skill sets as a unit manager. It certainly is important for us to master that skill as we get better and better at managing multi-units.
So you could almost say that could apply to anyone, really. I mean, anyone that's leading a team of people, or even just whether they actively are supervising those people or just leading a team. I think that, even if you don't run, lead, manage stores and you're listening to this podcast, but you happen to have a handful of employees that work for you, again, or just a team that you're putting together, that same skill set is important to those folks too.
Absolutely. My definition of a leader, I actually have several, but my favorite one is this. You're not a leader until you can produce a leader who can produce another leader. So the core tenet to me of leadership is development you can't do it all yourself, so you need to delegate. You need to trust people. You need to give them the insight, clear expectations, and strategic clarity to get done what you're trying to do together. And once you do that, I think it's important for that person then to be able to teach someone else that skill as well, whether it's an assistant manager or someone else. That's the true hallmark of a great leader to me. It's about development, it's about training, it's about clarity, and it's about producing another leader. Ironically, the best multi-unit leaders build their own replacement.
I thought it was interesting that you talked about how there's such different skills between one store and multi-unit operators. And it reminds me of sports. When you look at broadcasters, when you look at coaches and managers, pick a sport, they're generally the grinders. They're the ones that really, really had to think about how to do things. And those who were Hall of Famers that have all the skills, they probably don't need to coach because they're plenty wealthy, but it's also because they may just have the skills and they don't have to teach. They just inherently know how to do these things, and it's difficult for them to communicate them. So when you look at the idea of developing your replacement who will replace someone else and the teacher to the teacher, what you're really saying is anyone can do this. It's not that there are only certain people that are born leaders. You can learn how to be a leader, and it may not be easy, but it can be done, and that's how you transition the business for growth.
I would agree with you if that skill set that you're bringing to that role, it includes great communication. To further your analogy of sports figures who became coaches, or try to become coaches, you mentioned it was the grinders that succeeded in Major League Baseball. Often coaches are former catchers who have called a game and understand the nuances of the game. But
absolutely,
I think
yes.
Yeah, and we could all think and recognize there are some great performers. Wayne Gretzky comes to mind. Joe Montana comes to mind. One in hockey, one in football, who tried to coach and failed quickly. I think it's probably to your point that they weren't as good of a communicator as they thought. They thought the skills should or could come naturally because it did to them. And I think when you study why coaches fail, it's due to a lack of strategic clarity, focus, and clear communication.
Yeah, and catchers, they communicate. They are involved in every pitch. That star outfielder that hits all those home runs, involved in a couple plays in the outfield and a couple at bats. And absolutely agree with communications. You hear that constantly, whatever job. There really is no such thing as over communications, and it's not just this is what we want you to do, but I would imagine it's just as much this is you lead with, this is what we're trying to achieve, this then you get to here's how we get there.
Yes, and there's an analogy I make in the presentations I do and the conferences I do around the world relative to this point. It amazes me how many multi-unit leaders don't really know their store managers all that well. I don't mean that they have to socialize with them, go out for dinner with them, or order dinner for takeout with them on a regular basis. But I use the analogy that if you coached your son's or daughter's soccer team, you know, say they're 10 or 11-year-old kids, you take time to learn the nuances of each kid's skill sets, of their strengths, of the areas that they're challenged in. You'd work to understand how they like to communicate. You'd spend a good deal of time getting to know them on the field, knowing how to motivate them, what works, what doesn't work. You'd have a pregame plan that you would share with them. And I find it really interesting when you look at multi-unit leadership, whether it's convenience stores or restaurants, they will fail to have a plan for their people. They'll send their players out there each and every day They won't do a pre-shift meeting. They won't have a particular focus. They won't share strategic clarity. And they don't know them as well as they would get to know those 10 or 11-year-olds on the team that they coached. And which one would have greater success? Well, with the soccer team, you're really trying to develop them to have fun, to learn basic skills that they can carry throughout their life. But there's no reason that same analogy can't be applied at the convenience store level, at the restaurant level, to store managers who are overseeing multi-million-dollar businesses.
So even taking a step from that analogy up a level, and I'm going to stay with this here. Do you support having like coaches meetings? Like say like you're a league of coaches with 10 and 11-year-old players. And in this case, you own the convenience store chain and you have maybe several multi-unit division managers, zone managers, whatever they're called here. What's some advice for those leaders listening, the leaders of the leaders?
Yeah, consistent and clear communication. I hate to be redundant, but I think that's a key and critical tool and strategy to use. Calling them on a daily basis. When you look at the best demonstrated practices of multi-unit leaders, there are daily calls with their managers, whether it's one-on-one or text exchanges or even Zoom meetings, where they spread energy. They don't take it away. They reinforce the goals they're looking at. They try to determine what challenges or problems they might be facing that they could help correct. They ask, where do you need more help from me? Where could I back off? Where do you need more resources, et cetera? And I do believe, in terms of best demonstrated practices, and research backs this up, that talking with all of your managers at one time, usually done on a monthly basis, in some cases done on a weekly basis on a Zoom call or conference call, where you exchange ideas together, where you spread energy to them. You, again, share that clarity with them. And also one other thing, in these calls, a best demonstrated practice is that you want to teach your managers, your coaches, how to think and not just tell them what to do.
You have so much experience around so many different channels. Some of them are franchise businesses, and some of them are just businesses that operate stores. Want to talk specifically about franchise operations just for a second, because a lot of our businesses, convenience stores, may be tied to a franchise operation in terms of the convenience brand, but more likely they might have a franchise within the convenience chain, whether it's a sandwich franchise or some other type of food franchise within the business. What are the things that you may need to look at when you're a multi-unit franchisee, and also running your own business? Because there you can be very hands-on with your own business, but with a franchise operation, it's a different model. So how can you be both hands-on and a coach and do them both, if that's the case?
That's a good question, because you have FBCs, franchise business consultants, that are hired by the brand to work with they're hired by the franchisor to work with the franchisee, that come in and inspect the stores. And these folks are paid by the franchisor, so they're, beholden to them in a certain way. But their name is not on the lease. Their name is not on the store ownership like the franchisee is. There's a bit more skin in the game for the franchisee. So a mistake that a lot of franchise business consultants working for the franchisor make is they come in and they inspect, then they correct, and they direct. They're compliance cops, or they're viewed that way sometimes. They come in with their checklist and say, this is up to brand standards, these things are not, sign this, let's scan it, we'll put it in the system, next month work on these things, and I'll see you in 30 days, and they walk away. And the franchisee in that kind of situation does not feel a connection to the brand. They feel like, okay, you may have judged me on my worst day, not my best day. You don't necessarily know my business as well as I do, and you haven't helped me get better. You've told me what you see is wrong, and that's a nuanced and an important thing for a franchise business consultant who works with a franchisor to understand. Instead of inspecting, correcting, and directing, what gets better results is to inquire, observe, and develop. When you come in, and that revolves around the nuances and the best practices of store visits, which is hopefully something we'll talk about later. But if you inquire, observe, and develop, you're asking questions about things. Why? You're asking yourself, why is this not happening, or why is this happening? You're balancing it. You're visiting several times before you sit down and evaluate. You're taking pictures of what's good, what's bad, and you're very focused on a developmental meeting at the end of your visit with the franchisee. That is it's a lot more than going through a checklist, but rather it's about how do we build your business together? What are the challenges you're seeing? This is what I observed. And where could I provide you some help? Would you need help relative to hiring? Do you need help relative to service? And so they ask bigger questions, and they're seen as partners then, and that makes both the franchisor more successful and the franchisee happier.
That is great advice. And I think you said somewhere in your book, or you wrote, paraphrase someone else, culture is how people act when the manager leaves the room, or in this case, when the franchisor leaves the store. And I think that's a really, it's true. It's what, and it's Jeff, you've said this before, it's knowing someone when you're not, how someone behaves when you're not looking, right? Is that what's your exact quote, Jeff?
Oh, it's something like that, but it's no doubt it's stolen from somebody else. But it's basically like culture is how you act when you think nobody's looking.
Yeah. Peter Drucker, the famous management guru, said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think that's something that we probably should just touch on real quickly, is the importance of building that strong culture in your team. And the culture from the franchisor perspective should not be one of gotcha, but rather, how can we get this better together?
So as we get towards the end of our time here, I wanted to talk just a brief bit about the pandemic that we're currently still living through here, at least here in the United States in the summer 2020. But a lot of the things that you talked about are things that we've learned to do. And I'll use Jeff and our colleague Chris's team here at NACS. One of the things we do every day is a daily check-in where we have anywhere between a 15 and hour and a half long meeting almost every morning just to talk about what's going on that day, what we did yesterday. Not so much checking in to make sure we're working, but just to, connect. And you mentioned that in terms of operators doing that Zoom calls, whether it's like all the zone managers or all the store managers with the team manager. And I think it's incredibly beneficial. We never did that before when we were in person every single day for year after year. And I think it's something we can take with us going forward as we one day get past this situation. But are there any other lessons learned from our, I don't know what to call remote/virtual culture, but I know stores have been open, so they've been a little different. But is there anything that this whole situation might help folks develop further into the future?
Well, the last point of what you said should be highlighted, that in the convenience store business, we have been open and multi-unit leaders have been visiting stores. So it's maybe in the early days of the pandemic in March, say they stayed back, they didn't know what to do very clearly, but they've been in the stores. They wear the masks, they see one another. So they're not working any less remotely than they used to. If you oversee 7, 8, 9, or 10 stores, your biggest enemy before the pandemic was geography. It was hard to get to see every store on a regular basis. So you relied on communication, not so much as Zoom as you did with conference calls, or you looked at financial reports and you decided which stores to visit, which ones to prioritize first. But the key lessons during coronavirus, I think, is the pre-shift meeting. I'm not sure what, Carolyn, you just called it that you guys do on a regular basis, but we call it the pre-shift meeting, that daily communication. A manager in a convenience store can do that with one or two other team members, and certainly the multi-unit leader can do it with a short call daily, or at least bi-weekly with their store managers. I think the safety and sanitation concerns have moved up to the top of consideration. It's always cleanliness and safety, sanitation have always been important, but now I think we've moved it up to a higher level. So they're concentrating and focusing on something more minutely, perhaps, than they had before. I think that if we let some people go and then we brought them back in, if people were furloughed, there's a need for multi-unit leaders to re-onboard. I think we're familiar, or your listeners are familiar with onboarding. That's the notion or concept of when you hire someone, you acclimate them to your culture, you train them, you teach them what to do, and then you put them in the role. Well, bringing people back from a furlough requires re-onboarding. That's something I'm doing with my clients at Disney, and it was a really a key awareness, because when someone is off the job for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, I think you have to reorient them to the new times and the new reality. I think active listening more than ever is really important during coronavirus. And a pandemic and the challenge of this size and nature, and that came out of left field. I think it's really important that we listen to our managers, store managers' challenges, their fears, their concerns, which might be related to the business, and it might be stressing them in other ways. It might be stressing them in terms of lower sales, not getting a PPP loan that they applied for, whatever it might be. So we need to be better active listeners. I think the other thing that the coronavirus has shown us is that multi-unit leaders have to be actively collecting best demonstrated practices. We don't want to go through this again, but there's a chance we may go through this again globally, or in the U.S. As of this date, it isn't subsiding; it is rising. So, what can we do to pursue the bright spots? And are we spending as much time scaling successes as we are on trying to eliminate problems? I think that's something that multi-unit leaders have learned to do and are practicing more during the pandemic.
Jim, I loved how you wrapped this up on opportunity, and I'll just reiterate something you just said that I think is hugely important, tying into something you said earlier. You said, it's really critical to know your teams, know who they are. Talking about the soccer team, and you know the kids, but you may not know the managers. If you're on daily or regular calls and you see cats and dogs in the background, think of that as an opportunity to know a little bit more about the person, or a kid running around, or pictures in the background, or anything like that. They're all ways to learn a little bit more about people. But in wrapping up, I want to paraphrase a title from an Elvis album from long ago. 250,000 readers can't be wrong, because that is roughly how many people have bought Jim's book called Multi-Unit Leadership. It's in its 4th edition. Jim, I'm sure people are interested in learning how they can find it and where they can learn a little bit more about you. So how can they find you?
Well, thank you very much. I first of all, I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully this insight is valuable to the people who are listening in the near term and the long term. The book is available, probably the easiest way is through Amazon. It's available at your local bookstores for those of you supporting local bookstores, and it's also available on our website at Sullivision.com. And at Sullivision.com also you'll find a whole section with great free insight, resources, ideas, specifically on multi-unit leadership. So if you don't buy the book, at least go to the website and check that out, and see if those ideas resonate with you, and you can share it with your team members as well. Also, the multi-unit leadership book is available on Audible.com, where it's the best-selling audiobook right now in business. So that's
nice.
Check it out if you prefer to do your listening as use your windshield time as a mobile university.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, if the Elvis reference and the #1 bestseller didn't get you to that website, I'm not sure what we can do to get you there. So, thank you very much, Jim. That was a great conversation, and just talking about how there's so much opportunity when you look to grow the business, and it's all there. So, thank you very much for joining us today, Jim.
My pleasure. There's so much to talk about and learn about leadership. If we have an opportunity to talk again, I'd be happy to. And I thank you for this opportunity. So we'll see you down the road.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.